The fat girl stood before the most dangerous mafia boss in the city. Your mother owes me money. You're the payment. She agreed, thinking no one could want her anyway. What she didn't know, he'd been watching her for 2 years. The debt was fake. His love was real. Elena's hands were still sticky with grease from the diner when she pushed open the front door of her cramped apartment. The smell of burnt coffee and cheap perfume clung to her uniform, and her feet ached from another 12-hour shift that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. She was already calculating how many instant noodle packets were left in the cupboard when she heard her mother's nervous laughter floating from the living room. Elena, sweetheart, come here. We have guests. Something in her mother's voice made Elena's stomach drop. Maria Santos never called anyone sweetheart unless she was in serious trouble. Elena kicked off her worn sneakers and padded toward the living room, expecting to find another debt collector or maybe her mother's latest boyfriend. Instead, she froze in the doorway. 3 men in expensive suits sat on their threadbare couch like they owned the place. The man in the center had dark hair slicked back and eyes so cold they seemed to freeze the air around him. His hands rested calmly on his knees, but Elena noticed the tattoo peeking out from his cuff, a serpent wrapped around a dagger. She'd seen enough crime documentaries to know what that meant. Her mother sat across from them, hands shaking as she gripped a cup of coffee. Tears streaked down her face, smearing her makeup. Mom. Elena's voice came out smaller than she intended. What's going on? The man in the center studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. His gaze swept from her round face down to her fat, curvy figure, taking in every inch of her 5 feet 4 inches frame. Elena instinctively crossed her arms over her chest, wishing she could disappear. Elena, his voice was smooth as silk but carried an edge that could cut glass. I'm Matteo Benedetti. Your mother has told me so much about you. Elena looked between her mother and the stranger, confusion growing. I don't understand. Mom, who are these people? Maria burst into fresh tears. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Matteo raised a hand, and Maria immediately went silent. The power in that simple gesture sent chills down Elena's spine. Your mother owes me money, Elena. A considerable amount. Matteo's tone was conversational, like they were discussing the weather. $437,000, to be exact. Elena's knees nearly gave out. 400,000. The casino was supposed to be a sure thing, Maria whispered. Jimmy said his friend worked there, said he could guarantee. Jimmy lied. Matteo interrupted, still watching Elena. As did his friend. Your mother discovered this after she'd already lost everything she borrowed from me. Plus interest, of course. Elena's mind reeled. Her mother had always had a gambling problem, but this was beyond anything she'd imagined. We don't have that kind of money. You know we don't. We can barely afford rent. I'm aware of your financial situation. Matteo leaned forward slightly. Which is why your mother has proposed an alternative arrangement. I'll work, Elena said quickly, desperation creeping into her voice. I'll get another job, work nights, weekends. I'll pay you back somehow. Matteo's lips curved in what might have been a smile, but his eyes remained ice cold. At your current salary, it would take approximately 43 years to repay the debt. I'm not known for my patience. One of the other men chuckled darkly, earning a sharp look from Matteo that silenced him instantly. Then what do you want? Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. Your mother has offered you as payment. The world tilted. Elena gripped the doorframe to keep from falling. She. What? I told you I was sorry. Maria sobbed. I didn't have a choice. Elena stared at her mother in horror. You're selling me? Like property. Now, Matteo said, standing gracefully. He was taller than she'd expected, probably 6'2", and moved with the fluid confidence of a predator. Let's not be dramatic. I'm not interested in keeping you as some sort of servant or mistress, if that's what you're thinking. Elena's confusion deepened. Then what? You're going to marry me? The words hit her like a physical blow. Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? Tomorrow morning, you will become my wife. The debt will be considered paid in full. That's insane. Elena found her voice, anger cutting through her shock. You can't just. I won't. I don't even know you. Mateo stepped closer, and Elena caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something dangerous. The alternative is that your mother's body will be found in the river by the end of the week. Your brother Leo as well, I imagine. Children of debtors rarely live long in my world. Elena's blood turned to ice. Leo? He's only 17. He has nothing to do with this. Debts have a way of spreading through families like cancer. Mateo's voice was almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. Unless, of course, the family becomes my family. Wives and children of Matteo Benedetti are untouchable, even by me. Elena looked at her mother, who couldn't meet her eyes. In that moment, she understood the full scope of her mother's betrayal. Not only had Maria gambled away their future, but she'd also put Elena's baby brother in danger. Why me? Elena whispered. You could have anyone. I'm nobody. Something flickered in Mateo's expression, so briefly she almost missed it. You underestimate yourself, Elena Santos. Soon to be Elena Benedetti. He turned to leave, his men falling into step behind him. Wait, Elena called out. I haven't agreed to anything. Matteo paused at the door, glancing back over his shoulder. You have until sunrise to decide. Marry me, and your family lives under my protection. Refuse, he shrugged elegant shoulders.
Well,
I suppose we'll see how much your principles are worth when your brother's life hangs in the balance. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Elena alone with her sobbing mother and the wreckage of her life. Elena sank onto the couch, her mind spinning. Marriage to a stranger. A criminal. A man who spoke of death as casually as ordering coffee. But Leo's face flashed in her mind, his bright smile, his dreams of college, his complete innocence in all of this. Her sweet baby brother, who still brought her flowers he picked from the neighbor's garden. She had no choice. She'd never had a choice. As her mother's sobs filled the silence, Elena stared at the door where Matteo Benedetti had disappeared and wondered if she'd just agreed to marry the devil himself. Tomorrow, she would no longer be Elena Santos, the nobody who served coffee for minimum wage. Tomorrow, she would become the wife of the most dangerous man in the city. And she had absolutely no idea why he wanted her. Elena didn't sleep. She sat by her bedroom window, watching the sun creep over the horizon and wondering if it would be the last sunrise she'd ever see as Elena Santos. At exactly 6 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up outside her building. Her mother was still passed out on the couch, empty wine bottles scattered around her like broken promises. Elena had stopped trying to wake her hours ago. The knock on the door was soft but firm. Elena opened it to find a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled into an elegant bun. Miss Santos? I'm Mrs. Romano, Mr. Benedetti's housekeeper. I'm here to take you home. Home. The word felt foreign on Elena's tongue. This wasn't going home, this was being collected like a package. The ride to Matteo's estate passed in a blur of expensive neighborhoods Elena had only seen in magazines. When the gates opened to reveal a sprawling mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie, Elena's breath caught in her throat. Marble fountains, manicured gardens, and windows that gleamed like diamonds in the morning sun. It's beautiful, isn't it? Mrs. Romano said gently. Don't worry, dear. Mr. Benedetti may seem cold, but he's not cruel. Elena wasn't sure she believed that. Inside, the mansion was even more overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings in gold frames, and furniture that probably cost more than Elena made in a year. She felt like a stain on the perfect white marble floors. We need to get you ready, Mrs. Romano said, leading Elena up a grand staircase. The ceremony is in 3 hours. Elena's room, if she could call it that, was bigger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, draped in silk the color of champagne. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. But it was the dress hanging on the wardrobe that made Elena's knees weak. It was stunning, ivory silk that seemed to glow in the afternoon light, with delicate lace sleeves and a neckline that would actually flatter her figure instead of hiding it. The kind of dress she'd dreamed about as a little girl, before the world taught her that girls like her didn't get fairy tale weddings. Mr. Benedetti selected it himself, Mrs. Romano said, mistaking Elena's silence for admiration instead of terror. 2 other women entered, a makeup artist and a hairstylist, both treating this like any other wedding preparation. They chattered about the weather and complimented Elena's skin while she sat frozen in the chair, watching herself transform in the mirror. The girl staring back at her was almost unrecognizable. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, her brown eyes enhanced with subtle makeup that made them look bigger and brighter. The dress. God, the dress actually made her look beautiful. For a moment, she let herself pretend this was real, that somewhere, a man who loved her was waiting nervously at an altar, that her father was alive to walk her down the aisle, that this wasn't the most expensive cage she'd ever been locked in. But then Mrs. Romano clipped a veil into her hair, and reality came crashing back. "You look lovely, dear," the older woman said softly. "Are you ready?" Elena wanted to laugh. Ready to marry a stranger? Ready to become the wife of a criminal? Ready to give up every dream she'd ever had? "Do I have a choice?" Mrs. Romano's expression softened with something that might have been pity. "We all make the choices we can live with, dear." The ceremony took place in what Matteo called the garden room, a glass-walled conservatory filled with white roses and baby's breath. About 20 men in expensive suits stood in neat rows, their faces carefully neutral. No women except for Mrs. Romano. No family except for the family Elena was about to marry into. Matteo stood at the makeshift altar in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Elena's car. He looked devastatingly handsome and completely unmoved, like he was attending a business meeting rather than his own wedding. Elena walked down the aisle alone, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped her bouquet. Every step felt like walking toward her execution. When she reached Matteo, he offered her his arm with practiced politeness. His touch was warm, which surprised her. Somehow she'd expected him to be as cold as his eyes. The officiant, a nervous little man who kept glancing at Matteo like he expected to be shot, rushed through the ceremony. Elena barely heard the words. She was too focused on the way Matteo's thumb brushed against her knuckles, so gently she wondered if she'd imagined it. "Do you, Matteo Benedetti, take Elena to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," his voice was steady, certain. "Do you, Elena Santos, take Matteo to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Elena's throat felt like sandpaper. Around them, 20 pairs of eyes waited for her answer. Her future hung in the balance of 2 little words. She thought of Leo, probably just waking up for school, completely unaware that his life depended on what she said next. "I do." The officiant smiled nervously. "You may now exchange vows." Elena blinked. Vows? No one had mentioned vows. But Matteo was already speaking, his dark eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "Elena, I promise to protect you always, to keep you safe from harm, and to honor you as my wife." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. "You will never be alone again." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the cold businessman who had threatened her family last night. This was something else entirely. When it was her turn, Elena's mind went blank. Finally, she whispered, "I promise to try." It wasn't much of a vow, but Matteo's lips curved in what might have been an almost smile. "You may kiss the bride." Elena's heart stopped. She'd somehow forgotten this part would happen. Matteo stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. "Trust me," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. His lips touched hers, soft and warm and far too brief. It was nothing like the passionate kisses she'd seen in movies, more like a promise than a claim. When he pulled away, Elena felt dizzy. "Ladies and gentlemen," the officiant announced, his relief palpable, "I present Mr. and Mrs. Benedetti." Polite applause filled the conservatory. Elena was now officially the wife of the most dangerous man she'd ever met. And she still had no idea why he'd wanted to marry her at all. 3 weeks into her marriage, Elena had memorized every marble tile in the mansion, counted every rose in the garden, and read half the books in Matteo's enormous library. She was living in paradise and slowly going insane. Her days followed the same pattern. Breakfast alone in the sunroom while Matteo handled business in his office. Lunch by the pool while armed men in suits watched her from the shadows. Dinner across from her husband, who spoke politely about everything except what he actually did for a living. At night, he disappeared into his own bedroom down the hall, leaving Elena to stare at the ceiling and wonder why he'd married her if he clearly didn't want to be around her. "Would you like to go shopping today, Mrs. Benedetti?" Mrs. Romano asked during breakfast, her tone carefully cheerful. "There's a lovely boutique in the city center." Elena looked up from her untouched eggs. "Can I go alone?" Mrs. Romano's smile faltered. "Well, you'd need to take security, of course. For your protection." Protection. That was the word everyone used, but it felt more like surveillance. Elena had tried to walk to the corner market 3 days ago and found herself politely but firmly escorted back by 2 men who never spoke but never left her side. "I think I'll just stay here," Elena muttered. After Mrs. Romano left, Elena wandered onto the balcony, overlooking the gardens. The morning air was crisp, and she could hear the distant sounds of the city beyond the high walls, car horns, sirens, life happening without her. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the small pebble that hit the balcony railing. Elena looked down to see a figure crouched behind the ornamental hedges. Her heart nearly stopped when she recognized the messy brown hair and familiar green backpack. "Leo," she whispered. Her 17-year-old brother grinned up at her and held up a small package. "Catch," he whispered back, tossing it underhand. Elena caught the bundle instinctively, glancing around to make sure none of Matteo's men were watching. The gardens were empty except for the groundskeeper working on the far side of the property. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "It's dangerous. I had to see you. Make sure you're okay," Leo's voice carried up to her. "Open it when you're alone. I'll be back next week, same time." Before Elena could protest, he melted back into the hedges and disappeared. Elena clutched the package to her chest, her heart pounding. Inside her room, she unwrapped it with shaking hands. A small flip phone fell out, along with a note in Leo's messy handwriting. "Big sis, I know you didn't choose this. I'm working on getting you out. This phone is untraceable. Hide it. I love you." Elena stared at the phone, tears blurring her vision. Leo was trying to save her, just like she'd saved him by marrying Matteo. The thought of her baby brother putting himself in danger made her stomach twist with fear. She hid the phone inside a hollow space behind her jewelry box and tried to go about her day normally. But that afternoon, everything changed. Elena was returning from the library when she heard voices from Matteo's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she recognized the deep, mocking tone of Marco, one of Matteo's lieutenants. "I still can't believe the boss married that fat cow," Marco was saying. What was he thinking? Elena froze in the hallway, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Another voice, Tony, she thought, chuckled. Maybe he lost a bet. Or maybe he needed someone so pathetic that no one would think twice about her disappearing later. "She's definitely the weak link now," Marco continued. "Any enemy who wants to hurt Matteo just has to grab the wife. She can't fight, can't run, can't do anything useful. She's like carrying around a target." Elena pressed her back against the wall, fighting the urge to vomit. Everything they were saying confirmed her worst fears. She was an embarrassment, a liability, a mistake Matteo was too proud to admit. "The boss must be ashamed of her," Tony said. "Have you noticed he never takes her anywhere? Never introduces her to anyone important? Hell, he won't even sleep in the same room as her." Their laughter felt like knives in Elena's chest. She turned and fled to her room, their cruel words echoing in her head. That evening at dinner, Mateo seemed to sense something was wrong. "You're quiet tonight," he observed, cutting his steak with surgical precision. Elena pushed food around her plate, not trusting herself to speak without crying. "Elena," his voice was sharper now. "Look at me." She reluctantly met his dark eyes, hoping he couldn't see the hurt she was trying so hard to hide. Mateo studied her for a long moment. "Someone has been filling your head with lies." It wasn't a question. Elena's blood chilled. Could he somehow know about Leo's visit? "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully. "Don't lie to me." Mateo set down his fork, his full attention focused on her like a laser. "I can see it in your face. Someone has told you something that's upset you." Elena's hands trembled in her lap. "Your men think I'm a weak link. They think you're ashamed of me." Mateo's expression darkened dangerously. "Which men?" "It doesn't matter," Elena said quickly, not wanting to get anyone killed over hurt feelings. "They're not wrong, are they? You married me to pay a debt, not because you wanted a wife. I'm just here, taking up space in your beautiful house." For a moment, Mateo's mask slipped, and Elena saw something raw and almost vulnerable in his eyes. But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Never listen to what others say about us," he said quietly. "They don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me." Elena's composure finally cracked. "Tell me why you married me. Tell me why you won't even touch me. Tell me something real." Mateo stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "Some truths are more dangerous than lies, Elena. Be grateful for what you have." He walked away, leaving Elena alone with her cold dinner and her burning questions. That night, she held Leo's hidden phone and wondered if her baby brother was right. Maybe it was time to find a way out of this golden cage. The first sign that Elena's life was about to get even more complicated came during her morning coffee. She was sitting in the sunroom, watching the gardeners through the floor-to-ceiling windows, when she noticed something different. More men. At least 6 additional guards patrolling the grounds, their bulky frames impossible to miss even from a distance. Mrs. Romano entered with fresh pastries, her usually cheerful demeanor strained. "Good morning, Mrs. Benedetti. Mr. Benedetti asked me to inform you that you'll need to stay inside today." Elena frowned. "Inside the house or inside the grounds?" "The house, dear. Just as a precaution." Elena's stomach dropped. "What kind of precaution?" Before Mrs. Romano could answer, Mateo appeared in the doorway. Even at 8 in the morning, he looked impeccable in a tailored navy suit, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. "Leave us," he told Mrs. Romano, who hurried away with obvious relief. Mateo sat across from Elena, his dark eyes scanning her face like he was memorizing every detail. "There have been some developments. Nothing you need to worry about, but I'm increasing security for a while." "What kind of developments?" "Business rivals. It's not uncommon in my line of work." Elena set down her coffee cup harder than necessary. "Your line of work being crime?" Something flickered in Mateo's expression. "My line of work being protection. I protect what's mine." The possessiveness in his tone made Elena's pulse quicken, though she wasn't sure if it was fear or something else entirely. "I'm not a thing to be protected," she said quietly. "No," Mateo agreed, surprising her. "You're much more valuable than a thing." Before Elena could ask what he meant, Mateo's phone buzzed. His face hardened as he read the message. "I have to go. Remember, stay inside today." Elena watched him leave, feeling more trapped than ever. What Elena didn't know was that 50 miles across the city, Victor Varga was holding his own meeting in the back room of a strip club he owned. Unlike Mateo's sophisticated operation, Varga's empire was built on fear, brutality, and a complete lack of finesse. "So Benedetti has a wife now," Varga said, studying the surveillance photos spread across the grimy table. "Elena Santos, 24 years old, worked at Murphy's Diner. No criminal record. No useful connections." His lieutenant, a scarred man named Pavel, leaned forward. Word is she's payment for her mother's gambling debts. Benedetti doesn't even like her, keeps her locked up like a prisoner. Varga's thin lips curved in a predatory smile. Perfect. A wife he's ashamed of, but legally bound to. Do you know what that makes her, Pavel? A weakness? The weakness. Matteo Benedetti has spent 15 years building a reputation as untouchable. Cold. Calculating. But even the coldest man has pressure points. Varga tapped Elena's photo. And this little fat mouse is his. Pavel looked skeptical. She doesn't look like much of a pressure point. That's what makes it beautiful, Varga said. No one expects her to matter. But wives. Wives have legal rights, access, knowledge. And when wives disappear, even the most controlled men become reckless. He turned to another man sitting silently in the corner. Dimitri, I want you to reach out to the brother. Leo Santos. The boy's been sniffing around, asking questions about his sister's new husband. Maybe we can give him the answers he's looking for. Leo Santos had never imagined he'd be sitting in a coffee shop across from a man who looked like he could snap his neck with one hand. But Dimitri had promised information about Matteo Benedetti, and Leo was desperate enough to meet with anyone who could help Elena. Your sister's husband is not a good man, Dimitri said in heavily accented English, sliding a manila folder across the table. These documents. They show his real business. Money laundering. Extortion. Murder. Leo's hands shook as he opened the folder. Bank statements, police reports, photographs, all with Matteo's name or businesses connected to him. Where did you get these? I worked, for police. Before I see how corrupt they are, Dimitri's expression was carefully neutral. Your sister married a killer. But with these documents, you could expose him. Send him to prison. Free your sister. Leo stared at the evidence, his mind racing. If he could prove Matteo was a criminal, Elena could divorce him. The debt would be invalid. She could come home. What do you want in return? Dimitri smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nothing. I just want to see bad man get justice. Leo carefully closed the folder. I need time to think. Of course. But do not wait too long. Your sister. She is in more danger than you know. That evening, Elena was surprised when Matteo joined her for dinner. Usually, he was handling business until well after she'd gone to bed. You look tired, she observed, noting the tension around his eyes. Long day, Matteo poured himself a generous glass of wine. Elena, I need you to understand something. The next few weeks might be challenging. I'm going to have more men around. More restrictions. I need you to trust me. Trust you. Elena's voice rose. How can I trust someone who won't even tell me what's happening? I'm your wife, not your pet. You're my wife, which means you're a target, Matteo said sharply. There are people who would hurt you to get to me. People who wouldn't hesitate to. He stopped abruptly, running a hand through his dark hair. To what? Elena demanded. Matteo looked at her for a long moment, and Elena saw something that looked almost like fear in his eyes. To take away the only thing I can't replace, he said quietly. Before Elena could process what that meant, Matteo's phone rang. He answered it with a sharp yes. His face went completely white. When he barked into the phone. How long ago? Elena watched her husband transform before her eyes, the controlled businessman disappearing and something much more dangerous taking his place. Double the perimeter guard. No one gets within 100 yards of this house. And find out how the hell they got that close. He hung up and turned to Elena, his expression grim. What's wrong? She whispered. Someone tried to breach the east wall 20 minutes ago. They were armed with long-range rifles. Elena's blood turned to ice. Rifles? Were they trying to kill you? Matteo finished. Yes. They were in position to take a shot through the sunroom windows. Right where you have coffee, every morning. Elena sank into her chair, the full weight of her situation finally hitting her. She wasn't just married to a dangerous man. She was married to a dangerous man with even more dangerous enemies. And now she was in their crosshairs too. Elena couldn't sleep. Every shadow outside her window looked like a sniper. Every creak of the old mansion sounded like footsteps. By 3 a.m., she'd had enough of being a sitting duck in a house full of secrets. She found Matteo in his study, still fully dressed despite the late hour. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, multiple phones arranged in front of him like weapons. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked almost human. "You should be sleeping," he said without looking up from the security reports scattered across his desk. "Hard to sleep when people are trying to kill me." Elena closed the door behind her, her heart pounding with nervous energy. "I want answers, Matteo. Real ones." "Elena." "No." She stepped closer to his desk, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm tired of being treated like a child. Like a pretty decoration you keep locked away for special occasions. If I'm going to die for being your wife, I deserve to know why you married me in the first place." Matteo finally looked up, his dark eyes unreadable. "You think I keep you for appearances? Don't you?" Elena's voice cracked with weeks of suppressed hurt. "Your men laugh about me behind your back. You won't introduce me to your business associates. You won't even share a bedroom with me. I'm like some embarrassing secret you're stuck with." Something dangerous flickered in Matteo's expression. "My men will no longer be laughing about anything. That's not the point." Elena slammed her hand on his desk, papers scattering. "The point is that you married me to settle a debt, and now you're stuck with me. At least have the decency to admit it." Matteo stood slowly, his tall frame unfolding like a predator, rising to strike. But instead of anger, Elena saw something that looked almost like pain in his eyes. "You want the truth?" His voice was quiet, deadly serious. "Your mother's debt wasn't random, Elena. It was orchestrated." Elena blinked. "What do you mean?" "Victor Varga has been trying to find a way to hurt me for years. When he learned about your mother's gambling addiction, he made sure she had access to my casino. Made sure she kept losing. Made sure the debt grew to an amount she could never repay." Elena's legs felt weak. "You're saying this was all planned?" "Varga's plan was simple. When your mother couldn't pay, I'd have her killed as an example. Her children would be sold to cover the remaining debt. You would have ended up in one of his brothels, Elena. Your brother would have disappeared entirely." The room spun around Elena. "But you didn't." "I married you instead." Matteo moved around the desk, stopping just close enough that Elena could smell his cologne. "The only way to protect you from Varga was to make you untouchable. Wives of made men have certain protections, even from our enemies." "So you did marry me out of pity," Elena whispered. "No." Matteo's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. "I married you because I've been watching you for 2 years, Elena Santos. Every Tuesday when you walked past my office building to get to the bus stop. Every time you worked double shifts to pay your mother's smaller debts. Every time you stood up to the men who harassed you at that diner." Elena stared at him in shock. You knew who I was. I knew you were brave. I knew you were kind. I knew you protected everyone except yourself." His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. "I knew that if I ever had the chance to protect you the way you protected everyone else, I would take it. But the debt gave me an excuse." Matteo's admission was barely above a whisper. "I've wanted you for longer than I care to admit, Elena. I just never thought someone like you would look twice at someone like me." Elena's world tilted. "Someone like you? You're everything. Powerful, handsome, rich. A killer," Matteo said simply. "A criminal. A man whose hands are stained with blood. And I'm fat and ordinary, and you're extraordinary." Matteo's voice was fierce. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, and you don't even know it." For a moment, they stood frozen, the truth hanging between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. Then Elena rose on her toes and kissed him. It was nothing like their wedding kiss. This was desperate, hungry, full of weeks of confusion and longing. Matteo responded instantly, his arms coming around her like he'd been waiting for this moment forever. When they finally broke apart, Elena was breathless. Matteo, The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Somewhere in the house, an alarm began to wail. "Stay down," Matteo commanded, pushing Elena behind his desk as he pulled a gun from a hidden drawer. The sound of gunfire erupted from the grounds outside. Shouts in multiple languages. The crash of breaking glass. "They're inside the perimeter," Matteo said into his phone. "All units to the main house.
Now."
Elena crouched behind the desk, her heart hammering as she watched her husband transform into someone she barely recognized. The gentle man who had just confessed his feelings was gone, replaced by a lethal predator. "How many?" Matteo barked into his phone. The study door exploded inward. 3 men in black tactical gear poured through, automatic weapons raised. Matteo moved like lightning, his first shot taking down the lead gunman before Elena could even scream. The next few seconds were chaos.
Gunfire. Shouts.
The acrid smell of cordite filling the air. When the smoke cleared, 3 bodies lay motionless on the Persian rug. Matteo stood over them, his gun still trained on the doorway, blood seeping from a cut on his cheek. "Elena?" His voice was hoarse. "Are you hurt?" Elena crawled out from behind the desk on shaking legs. I'm okay. Matteo's phone rang. He answered it without taking his eyes off the door. "Report." His face went hard as stone. 8 men down on our side. They retreated, but they got what they came for. His eyes found Elena's. "They have the layout of the house. Security codes. Guard rotations." Elena's blood chilled. "What does that mean?" Matteo reloaded his gun with practiced efficiency. "It means this was just a test run, cara mia. The real attack is coming." The call came at 2 a.m., 2 days after the failed assault on the mansion. Elena woke to the sound of Matteo's phone buzzing urgently on his nightstand. After their kiss in the study, he'd finally moved into her bedroom, though they'd spent most of their time planning security measures rather than anything romantic. "Benedetti," Matteo answered, his voice instantly alert despite having been asleep moments before. Elena watched his face change as he listened to the caller. His jaw tightened, and something cold flickered in his dark eyes. "When and where?" He was already reaching for his clothes. "How do you know it's legitimate?" Elena sat up, dread pooling in her stomach. "What's wrong?" Matteo covered the phone's mouthpiece. "One of my suppliers wants to meet. Claims he has information about Varga's next move. At 2 a.m. These things don't happen during business hours." Matteo was pulling on his shirt, his movements sharp and efficient. "I have to go. This could be the break we need." Elena grabbed his arm. "Don't. Please. It feels wrong." For a moment, Matteo's expression softened. He sat on the edge of the bed and cupped her face in his hands. "I've been in this business for 15 years, cara mia. I know how to handle myself. But what if it's a trap? Then I'll be ready for one." He kissed her forehead. "Marco and 6 others will stay here with you. You'll be safe." After Matteo left, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She tried to go back to sleep, but every sound made her jump. Finally, she gave up and went to make coffee. The kitchen was empty at this hour, the mansion eerily quiet. Elena had just started the coffee maker when she heard a soft scratching at the back door. Her heart leaped. Leo. She opened the door to find her brother crouched in the shadows, but something was wrong. His face was streaked with tears, and his hands were shaking. "Leo? What are you doing here?" "Elena, I'm so sorry." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry for what?" Before Leo could answer, Elena heard the soft whistle of something cutting through the air. A dart hit her in the neck, and immediately her vision began to blur. "Leo," she gasped, reaching for him. But her brother was backing away, horror written across his young face. "I didn't know," he was saying. "They told me it was just information." I didn't know they would. Elena hit the ground hard, her body going limp as the tranquilizer took hold. The last thing she saw was Leo's anguished face before men in black masks swarmed into the kitchen. Elena woke in darkness, her head pounding and her mouth dry as sand. She tried to move and discovered her hands were zip-tied behind her back, her ankles bound to the legs of a metal chair. Ah, the sleeping beauty awakens. A light flicked on, temporarily blinding Elena. When her vision cleared, she found herself in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Concrete floors, rusted beams, and the distant sound of traffic suggesting they were somewhere near the docks. The man sitting across from her was thin and pale, with sharp features and dead eyes. This had to be Victor Varga. "You're smaller than I expected," Varga said, studying her like a particularly interesting insect. "And fatter. I can see why Benedetti keeps you hidden away." Elena's fear crystallized into anger. "Go to hell." Varga laughed, a sound like nails on glass. "There's the spirit I heard about. Your little brother told us you were a fighter." Elena's blood turned to ice. "What did you do to Leo?" "Nothing." Yet Varga stood, circling her chair like a shark. The boy was so eager to help his big sister. So easy to manipulate. "We fed him just enough real information about your husband to gain his trust, then convinced him to feed us information in return." "Leo would never." "Oh, but he did. Security rotations, guard positions, the layout of the mansion, even your daily routines." Varga's smile was razor-sharp. "He thought he was gathering evidence to free you from the big bad criminal. Instead, he gave us everything we needed to take you." Elena struggled against her restraints, fury giving her strength. "He's just a kid. A useful kid. Though I suspect his usefulness has reached its end." The zip ties cut into Elena's wrists as she fought to break free. "I'll kill you if you hurt him." "You?" Varga laughed again. "You're the fat little pawn who's going to bring Matteo Benedetti to his knees. Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this moment?" Elena forced herself to stop struggling and think. Matteo had been lured away by a fake meeting. The attack on the mansion had been perfectly timed. Leo had been manipulated into providing intelligence. But they'd underestimated her. "You know what I think," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I think you're terrified of my husband. You've spent years trying to hurt him, and the only way you could manage it was by targeting his wife." Varga's smile faltered. "Careful, little mouse. What are you planning to do?
Kill me?
Then you'll have made Matteo your enemy for life. Keep me prisoner? He'll tear this city apart looking for me." Elena leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. "Either way, you've signed your own death warrant. Perhaps. But watching him suffer first will be worth it." Varga nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward with a camera. "Smile for your husband, Mrs. Benedetti. We're going to send him a little message." Matteo arrived at the supposed meeting location to find it empty, an abandoned restaurant that had been closed for months. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a single photo, Elena tied to a chair, fear and defiance warring in her dark eyes. Below the image was an address and a simple message, "Come alone or she dies." Matteo's hands shook as he immediately called Marco. "The house is secure," Marco reported.
But,
"Boss, there's something you need to know. We found evidence that someone gave Varga intel about our security. Guard schedules, building layouts, everything."
who?
Matteo's voice was deadly quiet. "The wife's brother, Leo Santos. We found him outside the estate, nearly catatonic. He keeps saying he's sorry that he didn't know." Matteo closed his eyes, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The kid had been played, manipulated into betraying his own sister. And now Elena was paying the price. "Bring him to me," Matteo said, "and call every man we have. It's time to end this." When Leo was brought to him 20 minutes later, the teenager could barely stand. Tears streamed down his face, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry," Leo whispered. "I thought I was helping her. They showed me documents, said you were a killer." I thought if I could gather enough evidence. You gave them everything they needed to take her. Leo collapsed to his knees.
Please.
Please, I'll do anything. Just save my sister. Mateo looked down at the broken boy who had unknowingly betrayed the one person he was trying to save. Part of him wanted to put a bullet in Leo's head and be done with it. But Elena loved her brother, and Elena was all that mattered now. Get up, Mateo said quietly. You want to help your sister? Then you're coming with me. The abandoned warehouse district was a maze of shadows and rusted metal, perfect for an ambush. Mateo crouched behind a shipping container with 8 of his most trusted men, studying the building where Elena was being held. Leo knelt beside him, his young face pale but determined. 12 guards outside, probably twice that inside, Marco whispered, lowering his binoculars. Vargas got her in the main floor, center of the building. It's a kill box. Then we don't give them time to kill, Mateo said quietly, checking his weapon one final time. Remember, Elena comes out alive. Everything else is secondary. Leo grabbed Mateo's arm. Let me go in first. If they see me, they might. Absolutely not, Mateo's voice was ice. You've done enough. Please, Leo's voice cracked. I have to fix this. I have to save her. Mateo looked at the broken teenager who reminded him so much of Elena, brave, loyal, and willing to sacrifice everything for family. You want to help? Cover the rear exit. Anyone who isn't us comes out that door, you shoot them. Inside the warehouse, Elena had been working at her restraints for hours. The zip ties had cut deep grooves in her wrists, but she could feel them starting to loosen. Years of lifting heavy trays at the diner had given her more upper body strength than Vargas' men had anticipated. Your husband is taking his time, Vargas said, pacing in front of her chair like a caged animal. Perhaps he doesn't value you as much as we thought. Elena didn't respond. She was focused on the guard stationed near the wall, young, nervous, constantly checking his phone. He'd made the mistake of setting his gun down while he texted, and Elena had been mentally calculating distances. The zip tie around her left wrist finally snapped. Elena kept her hands behind her back, waiting for the right moment. She thought of Mateo's words, "You're the strongest person I've ever met, and you don't even know it. Time to prove him right." The first explosion came from the north wall. Chaos erupted as Mateo's men poured through multiple entry points simultaneously. Gunfire echoed through the warehouse, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. In the confusion, Elena lunged forward, her chair still attached to her ankles. The nervous guard spun toward her, reaching for his weapon, but Elena was faster. She drove her shoulder into his stomach, sending him crashing into the concrete wall. His head hit with a sickening crack, and he slumped unconscious. Elena grabbed his gun with shaking hands, using it to shoot the zip ties binding her ankles. "You little bitch," Vargas snarled, pulling his own weapon. "I should have killed you the moment you arrived." "You should have," Elena agreed, raising the gun with both hands the way she'd seen in movies. "But you didn't." The bullet went wide. Elena had never fired a gun in her life, but it was close enough to send Varga diving for cover behind a shipping crate. Elena ran toward the sound of gunfire, knowing Mateo would be in the thick of it. She found him pinned down behind an overturned table, blood seeping through his shirt from a wound in his shoulder. 3 of Varga's men had him surrounded, their weapons trained on his position. Elena didn't think. She just acted. Her first shot hit one of the gunmen in the back. As he spun around in shock, Elena kept firing, her hands steady now that someone she loved was in danger. The other 2 men turned their weapons on her, and Elena dove behind a concrete pillar just as bullets chipped the stone where her head had been. "Elena!" Mateo's voice was raw with fear and fury. "What the hell are you doing?" "Saving your ass," she yelled back, reloading with hands that no longer shook. Mateo used the distraction to take out the remaining gunman, his shots precise and deadly. When the immediate threat was neutralized, he sprinted to Elena's position, his dark eyes wild with concern. "Are you hurt?" His hands roamed over her body, checking for injuries. I'm fine. You're the one bleeding. It's nothing. Mateo cupped her face in his hands, staring at her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. Elena, what you just did was stupid and reckless, I know. Was the bravest thing I've ever seen. His voice was thick with emotion. I love you. Do you understand me? I love you more than my own life. Before Elena could respond, Varga's voice echoed through the warehouse. How touching. But this ends now, Benedetti. They turned to see Varga emerge from behind the shipping containers, an assault rifle in his hands and desperation in his eyes. Half his men were dead, his plan was falling apart, but he still had enough firepower to kill them both. You think you've won? Varga snarled. You think stealing my territory, my men, my respect wasn't enough? Now you take my revenge too. Your territory was built on selling children, Mateo said coldly, positioning himself in front of Elena. Your respect was bought with fear. And your revenge dies here. Varga raised the rifle, his finger on the trigger. Elena saw the moment when Mateo prepared to throw himself in front of the bullets meant for her. Saw the love in his eyes that had nothing to do with control and everything to do with sacrifice. But she also saw something Mateo didn't, Leo, creeping up behind Varga with a length of rebar in his hands. Victor, Elena called out, stepping beside Mateo instead of behind him. You forgot something. What? I'm not just Mateo's wife, Elena smiled grimly. I'm Leo Santos' sister. And we protect each other. Leo brought the rebar down on Varga's skull with all the force 17 years of rage could muster. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as Varga crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath his head. Silence fell over the warehouse like a shroud. Elena turned to Mateo, her adrenaline finally wearing off, and realized she was shaking. Is it over? She whispered. Mateo pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like he would never let her go again. It's over, cara mia. It's finally over. 6 months after Victor Varga's death, Elena stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the neckline of an emerald silk dress that cost more than she used to make in 3 months. The woman looking back at her was almost unrecognizable from the frightened girl who had been offered as payment for her mother's debts. Her dark hair was styled in an elegant updo, diamond earrings catching the light when she moved. But it wasn't the expensive clothes or jewelry that had changed her. It was the confidence in her posture, the steel in her brown eyes, the way she carried herself like someone who had faced hell and come out stronger. You look beautiful, Mateo said from the doorway, his voice carrying the same note of reverence it had held for months now. Gone was the distant businessman who had married her out of duty. In his place stood a man who looked at her like she hung the moon and stars. I look terrifying, Elena corrected with a smile. Mrs. Romano told me 3 of your business associates are afraid to meet with you now because they heard I took down 2 armed men. 4 armed men, Mateo said, moving behind her to fasten her necklace, a stunning piece of white gold and sapphires that had belonged to his grandmother. And they should be afraid. My wife is not to be underestimated. Elena leaned back against his chest, still amazed by how natural this felt now. Are you sure about tonight? This is a big step. Tonight was the quarterly meeting of the 5 families, the most powerful mafia organizations on the East Coast. For the first time in the organization's 100-year history, a boss was bringing his wife to the formal dinner. I've never been more sure of anything, Mateo said, pressing a kiss to her neck. It's time everyone understood exactly who you are. The meeting was held at the Palazzo, an exclusive restaurant that closed to the public when the families gathered. Elena walked into the private dining room on Mateo's arm, her head held high despite the shocked stares that followed them. She recognized some faces from photos in Mateo's files. Antonio Rossi, head of the gambling operations, Vincent Chen, who controlled the docks, Maria Castellano, the only other woman to hold real power in this world, though she'd inherited it from her deceased husband. Gentlemen. Maria, Mateo's voice carried easily across the room. I'd like you to meet my wife, Elena. The silence was deafening. Elena had expected this. Wives were typically kept far away from business, treated as decorations rather than partners. Her presence here was either revolutionary or scandalous, depending on your perspective. Matteo, Antonio Rossi finally spoke, his tone carefully neutral. This is unexpected. Many things about my marriage have been unexpected, Matteo replied smoothly. Elena has proven herself to be an invaluable asset to our organization. Elena stepped forward slightly, meeting each person's gaze directly. I understand my presence here is unconventional. But then, so is surviving a kidnapping attempt and helping to eliminate Victor Varga. A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Word of Elena's role in the warehouse fight had spread through the underworld like wildfire, but hearing it confirmed directly from her was something else entirely. Maria Castellano was the first to smile. I like her already. During dinner, Elena found herself in conversations she never could have imagined 6 months ago. Vincent Chin asked her opinion on waterfront security after she mentioned noticing vulnerabilities during a recent walk along the docks. Antonio Rossi discussed the psychology of gambling addiction, genuinely interested in her insights from growing up with her mother's problems. But it was when Marco, the same man who had once mocked her behind her back, approached their table that Elena truly understood how much had changed. Mrs. Benedetti, he said formally, his previous arrogance replaced by genuine respect. I wanted to apologize for my earlier comments. I underestimated your importance to this family. Elena studied him for a moment, remembering the crushing pain of overhearing his cruel words. We all make mistakes, Marco. What matters is what we do to correct them. After Marco left, Matteo took her hand under the table. You didn't have to forgive him. Yes, I did. Elena squeezed his fingers. Holding on to that anger would only hurt me. He's learned his lesson. I saw it in his eyes when you demoted him after the warehouse incident. Matteo's expression darkened. His lucky demotion was all he received. The evening's culmination came when Matteo stood to address the room. Elena's heart pounded as all eyes turned to them. Traditionally, this organization has been built on the strength of brotherhood, Matteo began. Tonight, I want to expand that foundation. Elena isn't just my wife. She's my equal partner in everything we do. Her intelligence helped us identify Varga's weaknesses. Her courage helped us end his threat. Her loyalty has proven absolute. He turned to Elena, offering his hand. She stood beside him, her chin raised proudly. I present to you Elena Benedetti, not just as my wife, but as the queen of our territory. Anyone who has business with me has business with her. Anyone who shows her disrespect shows it to me. Anyone who threatens her will answer to both of us. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then Maria Castellano began to applaud, and gradually the others joined in. Elena smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in her life. Later that evening, Elena stood on the balcony of their bedroom, looking out over the gardens where she had once felt so trapped. The view looked different now, not like the walls of a prison, but like the borders of a kingdom she helped rule. Penny for your thoughts, Leo said, joining her outside. Her brother had moved into a guest house on the property, finally safe and slowly rebuilding his relationship with Elena. The guilt still haunted him, but he was learning to forgive himself. Just thinking about how far we've all come, Elena said, putting an arm around his shoulders. Are you happy here? I'm proud of you, Leo said simply. You turned something terrible into something powerful. You made them all see what I always knew, that my sister is unstoppable. Matteo appeared in the doorway, having changed into casual clothes. Family conference on the balcony. Just appreciating our view, Elena said, turning to kiss him softly. As her husband and brother talked quietly about Leo's college plans, Elena looked out over her new world. She thought about the scared, insecure girl who had walked down the aisle 6 months ago, certain she was marrying a stranger who would never love her. That girl had been wrong about so many things. Elena Benedetti, once Elena Santos, the nobody from the diner, was now exactly where she belonged. Not as a victim or a prize, but as a queen who had claimed her crown through courage, love, and her own unbreakable strength. And this was only the beginning.